Hello everybody, this is Toby Delbruck again, University of Zurich, ETH Zurich, also representing any labs and innovation. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to develop an event filter in jAER from scratch. So I have here open NetBeans, and the idea is that when you run it, you want to develop your own event processing filter which does something to the data coming from the sensor, produces an answer, and then shows you the result. I'm also going to show you in this tutorial how to make persistent property values, how to add tooltips, and how to do a bunch of useful stuff for filters, and especially for the users of such filters. So what I'm talking about here is an example, for example, like this median tracker filter, which is a very simple filter which tracks the median location of events. For example, if I take this pendulum again as an example and run this median tracker, you see how it tracks the location of this pendulum. But let's start off from scratch, violating the basic principle of coding that you should always start from somebody else's example, and just make a new event filter from scratch. So I'll make a Java class here, a new, control N, new Java class. I'll call it example, I'll call it jAER example or tutorial, and I'll stick it in some package, doesn't matter where for now, right at the root level. Usually you should pick some new kind of package when you fork jAER. And by the way, I highly recommend that when you get jAER that you actually fork it, so that if you develop something useful, you can make a pull request to us so we can merge your changes in. Okay, so I've made this new filter here. Let's delete this header comment. And I'm going to change this now. Now the basic thing you need to do for an event processing filter is to make it extend. It has to extend event filter 2D. I've hit control space here and I come out with this. You see the documentation here says that event filter 2D is a filter that filters or otherwise processes a packet of events. It's the base class for all processing methods in jAER. Okay, so let's do that. And now since I know what I want is to draw on top of the output, I'll do what needs to be done here, which is to tell it that it implements frame annotator. Okay, perhaps this name is not very nicely chosen, but that's the name for something that annotates on top of the drawing frame. So now you see that there's some errors already in this filter. So let's implement all the abstract methods of these two things. And there's still an error. It says that a missing constructor is there. There's a missing constructor. So now I'm going to do something that's very cool with this IDE. I'm going to do alt insert, or in other words, source. Should be alt insert here somewhere. Edit, source. I'm not sure where alt insert is, but it's fixed code. Let's find it here in the menu. Source, fixed code, alt enter. Okay, let's see what that does. Alt enter, no. Alt insert. I know for a fact that in jAER, let's find this alt insert. Source, alt insert, insert code. Okay, so if I do that, I can insert the constructor with that one click. Okay, so now you have a filter that will compile clean. There's no little red box here telling you there's something wrong with it. It doesn't do anything yet because none of these methods do anything. I'll throw unsupported operation exception. So let's get rid of some stuff we don't need. We'll use control E, which is a very nice built-in thing that other editors should do. Is to delete a line, you just do control E for erase. I'm not sure where that is in the menu. We'll get rid of this for reset filter, init filter, and annotate, so they just don't do anything right now. And then in filter packet, we'll get rid of that unsupported operation exception, and now we'll replace this by returning the input packet. So what we're passed here in this filter packet method is the event packet coming from the sensor, consisting of a list of variable size of events, and you need to return a new event packet. In this filter, we're not going to modify the data at all. We're just going to analyze it. So let's show how to do that. The basic idea is to do for a basic event E in this input packet, so that will iterate over, did I spell that right? Event, something spelled wrong. Basic event, okay, control space, okay. For basic event E, having difficulty here typing, I'm going to iterate over each event here. And in this example, we'll do something extremely simple, is just compute the mean location of the events. So let's put a field in here for this mean location. Float x mean equals 0. Y mean equals 0. And we'll make it private. And now we'll say, let's just update this x mean using a mixing factor. So we're going to kind of make a low-pass filter, an infinite impulse response, IIR, low-pass filter, update the x mean and y mean values. And that'll be controlled by this value mixing factor. Mixing factor, private float, mixing factor. And now I'm going to show you how to store recall this from preferences. So built into this event filter 2D are a bunch of get methods that will get things for the preferences. I can do, for example, get float. Okay, what you do is you pass it a key, which is the name usually of the variable, and a value. So let's make this 0.01f. You have to use an F in Java to specify a float value if it's not a double. Okay, so that will give mixing factor its preferences store value or the default of 0.01 or 1%. Okay, now we're going to take these event address, the address of this basic event. A basic event just has an X and a Y location and a timestamp, and it has other stuff like the raw address and the source, if you have multiple sources, multiple cameras, for instance. So let's do it like this. We'll do x mean, control space, equals 1 minus mixing factor times x mean. So that'll have 99% of the old value, plus, and now we need to update it with the x mean value, with the event address value, plus mixing factor times d dot x. So that'll gradually move the x mean towards the mean of the x addresses of the events. Now let's clone this line with control shift down arrow. I'll show you how to do that again. Control shift down arrow just clones a line. Control alt down arrow moves it around. That's a quick way of doing it. And now we can just do y mean equals y mean and event address dot y. Okay, so we're not doing anything fancy here. We're not using the timing of the events or anything. Now we're just updating this x mean and y mean value. And that'll be computed now by the filter. We can actually run the filter and see those values evolve. But we don't yet have control from the GUI of this mixing factor. And we're not displaying anything yet. Well, for the moment, when we're done with iterating over this packet, let's just print out the x mean and y mean values. So I'll show you how to do that. There's a built-in logger object which will print out stuff to the logging output. You can use system.out.println, but that's really bad if you leave that in code that other people use. So we'll log.info, and then we'll do string.format, and then we'll give it a format x mean x comma y means equals, let's do it like this, %.1f comma %.1f, and then we'll give it the values that we want to print, x mean and y mean. Okay, so that'll now print it out to the logging output, which will be displayed in the status bar of the viewer. But we still want control of this mixing factor because we want to say how fast these values are going to update. The quick way to add getter and setter methods, which is a Java Beans pattern that will be introspected to construct the control, is to go refactor and encapsulate fields. Control-Alt-Shift-E. So if I go Control-Alt-Shift-E, now I can see that it's offering, since I'm inside the mixing factor thing, or in fact even if you highlight a bunch of text and do it, it'll select the values, and it offers to make these two methods, set mixing factor and get mixing factor. The insert port is default. By default, I always put the new methods at the end, so they have historical, and we're going to use accessors even when the field is accessible. We'll unclick that. We don't need property change support or any other fancy stuff. We need to make these methods public. So now what that does here is it adds these two methods, get mixing factor and set mixing factor. When we set the mixing factor, we can of course restrict the values any way we like. I won't bother with that now. One thing I do want to do is store this value in preferences. So I put float, M, and now I do a very useful thing called Control K. I'm not sure where that is in the menu, but Control K is a very useful thing in NetBeans that completes it back to the previous word that starts with that same letter. So let's see if we can see where that is. Control K, insert previous matching word. If I just do M Control K, it'll put mixing factor in, and then I can do Control K again, it'll insert it again. I need a semicolon at the end. So now this will store, using this key mixing factor, the value of this mixing factor in the preferences store. And because there's a get mixing factor and set mixing factor pair of methods here, Java introspecting will allow the construction of the GUI, the control for this thing. Now let me show you two more things that are very useful for users of filters. I'm going to annotate this class here with, I'm going to say, give it a description. Description, okay. I say at description and example of a low pass average event location. And then a very useful thing also that you can do is say at development status let's see, is that right? No, I think you just say development status dot status dot experimental or in development. So this is when you want to commit code that compiles but it's not working yet. This Java class annotation here is kind of like extra sauce on a class that allows Java to do stuff. It's a good idea also in the Java doc, of course, to put some comment about what this class actually does. All right, we're ready to run this. We need to run it. It compiles clean. There's no red check marks or anything. And now we start jAER. And just like is shown in previous tutorials, we have to actually load this new filter, which is called jAER tutorial filter. So we'll go and click the filters window to get that up, select filters, and we need to select jAER tutorial here. You see it's yellow because it's in development, so it's actually quite hard to read it. But here's the effect of adding this description, because now this class description includes this comment. So I'll add this over here. Shouldn't be any problem constructing it. If your constructor has a problem, it won't show up in this list, and you need to go out here to the logging output and see what's wrong with it. So we've got our filter running. Let's run it here on some data like this pendulum data, or let's pick a cleaner set of this pendulum data so this mean tracking really works. Like this one, for example. That's terrible. That's also terrible. Well, that one's okay. It's not too bad. All right, so here's some data. It's a bit noisy. And now let's run this filter. Now, when we expose the controls for it, you see there's an ungrouped property called mixing factor here. We haven't given it a tooltip yet, but if I now run this, and you'll see that it's an exception. Aha, I did a mistake here. So let's go in here to the code where we've done this. We can just click on the error here, and there's some problem in the format conversion. What is it complaining about? Percent, oh I see, %.1f. So I had a 1 there. So now there's a beautiful thing about Java, which is if you don't change the interface, you can simply apply code changes. And then down here, you see that it says building jAER, debug fix. And now the code is built. We can enable it again because as soon as there's an exception thrown, the filter is disabled. So we can enable it again. There's still an exception. Now what's the exception? Let's enable it again and see what the exception is. Now, what am I doing wrong here? XY means equals percent point 1F. Boy, percent point 1F. Okay, so let's apply the code changes again. We've applied the code changes. It's building it here. And now we can see it working. And now it is working. And you see this log.info, which prints out here to the console output, also appears in the status display here. And you can see how these numbers are changing as this pendulum moves around. To make this thing make a little more sense, let's again apply this background filter to remove some noise and move to a part where there's just the pendulum moving around. By the way, I'm going to turn off the IMU here because there is no IMU. And now you see it kind of makes sense. If we single step here, the mean X and Y, if we just click here, the X is 220, the Y is 82, and in fact that's what the filter is telling you. When you run it, that location, the mean is like 220 for X and 115 for Y. So you can see the numbers changing. It's not especially useful because it's just a text output. So the last thing I'm going to show you here in this basic example, I'm going to show you two more things. One is how to add tooltips for your properties to help users actually use them. Second thing I'm going to show you is how to draw basic graphics. So let's go back to the code, which we can just leave running. Or in fact, let's just stop it right now. We'll hit X or File, Exit. The shortcut for that is just X. So what we need to do first is add a tooltip for this thing, mixing factor, set and get mixing factor. The way you do that is in the constructor, you say set property tooltip, I think. Set property tooltip. You can give it a group name now, if you like, if you have multiple complex things. But anyway, let's not bother with that now. And now we have to say mixing factor. We again use Control K and IIR low pass update rate. Okay. So now that'll now give this property a tooltip when people hover over it. Now, what we want to do is actually draw on this thing. So we have this method here, which is annotate, which you can get at easily here. This is passed to GL auto drawable. All the drawing within jAER, at least all the stuff that I've done and most other people have done, is done with OpenGL. How do you actually draw with this drawable object? Well, the simplest possible way to do that is just to open another filter and copy over the code. So let's do that, say, with background activity filter, since we know that thing is, well, actually that thing is not drawing anything. So let's take another filter which actually draws something like median tracking filter. And that was the subject of a former tutorial. We'll double click here on the annotate thing. And we're just going to copy here this code, which is GL2, and then let's just copy this code here to get the OpenGL drawing stuff. It's usually the best way to learn OpenGL, at least if you already know how to do it. And we've copied that code over, and now it's complaining because some things obviously are missing here. But we get the OpenGL drawing object, so this is the actual thing you use to draw with. You see what we do, whenever you highlight a variable, it goes and highlights all the places you use it. And incidentally, there's a very nice thing I need to show you here with variables in NetBeans. Suppose we've highlighted ymean and we want to go to previous and next instances where this variable is used. You can go navigate here, and if you do, I believe it's Alt-Shift-Up or Alt-Shift-Down, or Alt-Up and Alt-Down. If you just hold the Alt key down and hit the arrow key, it'll go to previous places where this variable is used. It's very useful for navigating around and understanding how variables are used. Anyway, going back to OpenGL here, what we do is we push the projection matrix. We set the color here to red, green, so it's a blue matrix. Set the line width to 4. We begin to draw a line loop. That's fine. Let's just draw a line loop of a fixed dimension around this mean location for the purpose of this thing. So now the drawing coordinates, when you draw in jAER, is just exactly the pixel coordinates, the x and y pixel coordinates on the sensor. So we can just draw a box here, which is like x mean, starts at x mean. Vertex 2D is just given by xy. So x mean minus 10 for the x, and y mean minus 10 for the y. And now we need 3 more vertices like that, so let's just clone that line. And so then we need to draw the next piece of the line at x mean plus 10, y mean minus 10, then x mean plus 10, y mean plus 10, and then at y mean minus 10 and x mean minus 10. So there's something wrong here. X mean minus 10. Okay, so I think we need to end up at the same place. I'm not even sure that we need this last call. Anyway, let's try to run this. You see, in this case, the background compilation didn't keep up, so there was still a red mark there. But now when we run this filter on this same data, we should see it draw a little blue box around the location of the mean event. Now, so you see it's actually drawing it, and there's a mistake in the drawing there. There's something wrong with the way I'm drawing that pendulum, that location. It's actually a triangle. Okay, now, we don't need to print out anymore, so let's comment that out. Compile in place, and let's fix this code which draws this mean location, and then we can mess around with the mixing factor, which, by the way, you should see now. If you look in this tutorial, now has a tooltip, which is the one that we added before, and so we can modify that, make it really big if we want it to jump around quickly, or we can make it really small if we want it to not move around too much. Now let's just fix this last piece of graphics, and then we're done with the tutorial for now. So I'm going from minus 10, x goes positive 10, y still negative. X and y both go positive. Now x should go negative, but y should be positive for this last piece of the thing. Let's compile that code change. We wait for this thing to happen down here. If we want to basically see the compiling happening, pick this tab down here to your debug fix. And now you should see that there's a nice little square around the thing. I can't think of anything else to say right now, so thank you very much for watching this tutorial.